Here it is, folks, the biggest mistake I ever made when writing young adult fiction. It comes down to one little word: perspective. Prior to my first young adult novel, I'd always written in third-person perspective, but for this action-packed urban fantasy thriller, I decided to write in first-person present. Now, initially, the writing came fairly easy to me. My protagonist was a quick-witted, smart-mouthed 16-year-old, so all it took was delving a little into my own juvenile past to lock in his voice and character. Side note, I'm not sure if it's the same for everyone, but for me at least, most days I still feel like a 16-year-old. Yes, my hair is gone, my memory is shot, my bones and muscles ache for no apparent reason, I need glasses to see straight, but deep down I still think of myself as a teenager. But either way, I tend to find it fairly easy to write with a teenage voice. I mean, Nirvana's still cool, right? Okay, so I started writing my book and things were going well, until I wrote a particularly adroit little paragraph and sat back in my chair to admire my work. And here's where I found the problem. The thing is, I love a nice turn of phrase. There's nothing more exciting for me as a writer than finding exactly the right combination of words and sounds to make a sentence really pop. I want the words to bounce off each other in interesting ways. I want them to taste delicious to readers. I want my words to sing, carrying readers away into the world of the story and captivating them until the last page. But I quickly realized that 16-year-old boys aren't known for their skill with language. My protagonist isn't going to employ a skillfully crafted turn of phrase. He's going to use lots of ums and ahs, likes and sort ofs. He's going to lean on well-worn idioms and words like sweet and clutch and, I don't know, are kids still saying wicked? Like it's a good thing? After 5 chapters of writing, I had to go back over the text and teenage down my protagonist's dialogue. I had to remind myself that readers would be seeing the narrative world from a 16-year-old's perspective, so I had to write accordingly. My choice to write in first-person present was so frustrating at this point that I almost gave up. It took a lot of time and persistence before I got into a rhythm with the language and started once again to warm to the story. I effectively had to narrow down my protagonist's view of the world while trying to heighten their emotional investment in what was going on. Rather than describing the narrative world in intricate detail, I focused on how my hero felt at being thrust into this nightmarish realm where peril awaits around every corner. Now, a little about the book at this point for context. Whiplash, my first foray into young adult novels, is about a teenage boy who's taken from his home in the dead of night, sent to an underground bunker where he's interrogated and locked up with a bunch of other teens who are all informed that they've been co-opted by a secret organization to fight in a war which will take place in a world of dreams. The story quickly expands to include a dream city called Rust, named for the orange color of its rotting metal walls, and becomes a journey of discovery as Jack, the protagonist, is forced to find his feet in a world where titanic forces are vying for control over reality itself. The Whiplash series is part of a broader selection of novels, short stories, and comics all within this Rust Chronicles universe, because that's what we all need, right? Another universe. But the key with this novel is that I wanted the protagonist, and therefore the reader, to be in the dark for most of the story. I wanted Jack to feel utterly bemused and helpless as he was carried from bizarre circumstance to bizarre circumstance, and I wanted the reader to be right there with him. That sense of dislocation and confusion is key to the experience of the story, and first-person perspective was a great tool I could use to heighten those sensations. But here's the thing. The world of Rust is a complex, expansive, intricately crafted universe with a host of complicated and intriguing characters. Here's a quick description of the city of Rust to give you some context.
The city Rust sits upon the cusp of possibility, a fetid sore at the hinge between worlds, ruled by 5 sisters, midnight spires that stretch skyward in the city's heart like the crooked fingers of some gargantuan deity. The city remembers itself by the myriad decaying walls, the blood-soaked cobblestones, and rotten clockwork that speak its long, violent history.
Now, that description and the artwork you just saw came out of a collection of short stories which relate to the Dream City and its inhabitants. It didn't come from Whiplash, and you can see why. There's no way my 16-year-old protagonist would say something like that, and it would be a little tricky for such an overtly descriptive paragraph to arise naturally from the story. Every experience, no matter how fantastic or otherworldly, had to be translated through the language and understanding of 16-year-old Jack. So how did I get around this? Simple, by using other characters to speak these more complex and intricately crafted phrases. There were more than enough characters in the mix for me to fill out a vivid description of the fantasy world in Whiplash without having Jack break character or inserting something inorganic into the story. As the novel progressed, I learned how to speak consistently in Jack's voice. I also became adept at using the voices of other characters to fill in the gaps and provide readers with a more expansive and detailed picture of the narrative world. Writing Whiplash, I fell in love with first-person perspective, to the point where the majority of the books I've written since have been in that same perspective. But most of those books haven't been young adult books, and there's a very good reason for that, which I'll cover in another video. Now, I'll put a link in the description to the books I referenced throughout the video. But if you want to know about finding your voice as a writer, then you should check this out.